Thank you, Jim. It's great to be here with two compatriots that we've been friends with for over 40 years. Neil Armstrong has arrived also, and then with Buzz Aldrin. To be here with our cosmonaut friends and all of you illustrious speakers and guests is a great honor for us all. I am overwhelmed with the illustrious group here that has spoken so far and who follows us. It's a humbling experience to be in the presence of so many famous individuals in academia and in science. So I have sort of four missions I want to cover. But first off, I'd like to say that when Apollo program was announced, I was a young fighter pilot in Ramstein, Germany, flying F-102s. And if you remember, we had 15 minutes of space experience in the U.S., and President Kennedy announced that we're going to go to the moon. As Buzz Aldrin says, we're going to land on the moon and we're going to return safely, which, as Buzz said, we all liked that point. I had no concept of being an astronaut. I laughed at Kennedy. Yeah, sure, we're going to make it. We got 8 years to do this, and we're going to make it. And basically, we were making it. I didn't have a clue that we would make it, or we were going to make it. I didn't think we would. But it turned out that 8 years and 2 months later, I'm sitting in mission control talking to them when they landed on the moon. So in 8 years and 2 months, from an announcement of a program to completion of the goal of the program was unbelievable to me. Today, if a program, similar program, was announced, we couldn't even write the proposal in 8 years and 2 months. Much less get it done in 8 years and 2 months. That's just the way things are today. Apollo was a political decision due to the space race. It turned out to be one of the greatest scientific endeavors of all mankind, I believe. We grew in our science knowledge, we grew in our ability as we learned. And I think that to be here with the two guys that were on Apollo 8 with Frank Borman is a great honor, because to me that was the most dangerous, riskiest mission that NASA ever undertook. It's the second time we used the second time we've flown the command module, and we were committing this crew to a lunar journey with very little experience on the spacecraft, zero manned experience on the Apollo Saturn V. So it was a very risky program, a very risky mission. But they pulled it off, and we were on our way. Apollo 12, Apollo 10, Apollo 9, Apollo 10, Apollo 11 were all successful. Apollo 12, we had a serious problem at liftoff. It got struck by lightning, and they lost all their electrical power for a fuel cell dropped off the line. But the Saturn vehicle was so sturdy, it just kept flying and flew right up into orbit, and they finally got their spacecraft recovered, and they went on to the moon for successful landing, as Jim related. Apollo 13, I was back up on Apollo 13. I was the Lunar Module pilot who was to back up Fred Hayes. If he got a problem, or if the crew got a problem, they broke a leg, they got sick, we would take their place. John Young, T.K. Mattingly, and myself. Well, if you remember those days, 41 years ago now, almost, over 41 years ago, I come down with the measles. And the NASA doctors were stunned. Astronauts don't get the measles. Kids get the measles. But I had the measles, and I exposed everybody to the measles, of the two crews, and everybody had had the measles and were immune except for Mattingly. So they took him off the flight, which was a very big disappointment, put in Jack Schweikert, who I had trained with. But the beauty of our training that Bill alluded to was so remarkable that in 4 or 5 days, Jim Lovell says, we're ready to go, with a crewman that they hadn't trained with but for less than a week. So our training was so standard and so thorough that somebody could step in and do that. I wouldn't recommend it, but that's what happened, and was so the backup concept on Apollo was very important. After it was over, Apollo 13, I thought NASA made a very major decision and a bold decision to continue Apollo. I mean, we accomplished the goal was landing on the moon. Why keep going? But they decided that we had these vehicles, we had the science, we wanted to do the science, so let's continue the mission. And so we started with Apollo 14, which was to land, they landed where Jim and his crew were supposed to land for Maru. And so it was, they had 2 EVAs. This is Ed Mitchell here. They didn't have a car like the later missions. They had this little mobile equipment transporter where they loaded their geology equipment on. Here's a little movie camera that they had with them. And here was the handle like a golf cart. And so they were able to pull this vehicle across the lunar surface with their geological equipment. They also deployed a ALSEP, which is the Apollo Lunar Surface Experiment Package, that contained a number of let's see how this is going to work. Well, maybe not. There we go. That contained an Apollo Experiments Package. This is now Apollo 14. Anyway, Apollo 14 had a successful 2 EVAs. They collected a number of pounds of lunar samples, deployed their ALSEP package, and we were off on the scientific exploration of the moon. The landing sites were selected across the front face of the moon to maximize the geologic return and the sample return of Apollo. John Young and I suggested we could land on the backside of the moon and see what it was like over there, but Houston said, no way, we got to be talking to you when you land on the back of the moon and land on the moon, and so we're not going to let you land on the backside. So all the landings were across the front face of the moon, north and south of the equator, because that was the capability of Apollo. And so after, you can see in the lunar surface here, the footprints of the crew as they walked around. They covered I think over 2 kilometers on foot, which was a pretty fantastic accomplishment for Apollo on foot. So to revolutionize the landing time and the geological exploration, the last 3 missions, starting with Apollo 15, were called the J missions. Our lunar module had more batteries, we had more oxygen, we had more cooling water, we had more consumables, if you will, we had more fuel. We also had a lunar rover. This was a vehicle that was designed by engineers at Marshall with AC Delco doing electronics and Boeing the assembly of the vehicle. You can see this is the high gain antenna. It was pointed straight up at the Earth. You had to have the vehicle stopped on the moon and pointed up, and the antenna aligned with the Earth so that you had enough signal strength on the TV to broadcast a signal back to Earth. On the Earth, we had 3 tracking stations, one in Australia as well as over mentioned, one in Spain at Madrid and one in Goldstone, California, with a 70-meter receiver dish. And they had enough, they could collect this signal strength to give you a reasonable TV picture. We had a color TV camera that we mounted on the front of the car, and all we had to do once we got it turned on, we just turned it on, and an engineer in mission control controlled the camera. He could pan it around, he could elevate, depress, he could zoom in and out and focus, and so he controlled the camera, while we would just went about our business. The car was electric, the 2 batteries right here, 28 volts, 100 ampere-hour batteries. Each wheel had its own electric motor. Here in the center, the tires were made out of wire, which was basically woven piano wire, which I saw that and I said, this is the dumbest looking tire I've ever seen. But the guy that designed the tire knew the lunar surface, so as we drove, it dug into the lunar surface and filled up with lunar dust. And so as you drove, the tires were filled with dust. It gave it tremendous traction. This vehicle could climb a 25-degree slope on the lunar surface. It weighed about 500 pounds down here. Up on the moon, it weighed 80 pounds, but it could carry 1,200 pounds. So just reverse of the automobile, down here, we had a very lightweight vehicle, but very sturdy vehicle. It had, the controller was a handle here, and when you push forward, you went forward. When you pull back, you put on the brakes. When you pull left, the front wheels turn left, and the rear wheels turn to the right. So you had double steering, and you pull back, you put on the brakes, of course. Well, if you wanted to go backwards, you just flipped the switch, pushed the hammer forward, and the car went back. But we had no rear view mirror. So you couldn't see behind you because you look back in your Apollo helmet and you're looking at the helmet, not the back of it. So nobody wanted to back up this vehicle. But sometimes you got in a situation where generally you just did a U-turn and turned around and you're on your way. Sometimes you got in a situation where that didn't work, so John got on his side, I got on my side, we just picked it up and turned it around. Man, I'll tell you, you felt like Superman up on the moon. Look at me, Ma, picking up my car. Well, John was the left seat here, he was the commander, and he drove. I was the right seat, and I was the navigator. We had a set of maps that was supposed to get us from point A to point B. And the maps worked if you landed in the right place. Fortunately, we landed in the right place within a couple hundred meters of where our intended landing spot was. That was very dynamic, by the way, and all the interviews I've ever given on what's it like on the moon. So what's the most exciting thing of landing on the moon, of being on the moon? I said the landing is the most exciting thing. Because you want to make it, if you don't make a good landing, the rest of it just spoils your whole day. We had seat belts, so we buckled our seat belts because the drive across the moon was very rough. It bounced a lot in this light gravity. Each wheel had its own independent system of shock absorber with some dampers. On the back of the car, we had a lunar tool carrier, which carried a mobile magnetics experiment. It carried rakes and tongs and a penetrometer test and other things like that did a lot of, allowed us to do a lot of geology away from the Apollo Lunar Surface Experiments package. We navigated on the moon with a directional gyro. The moon has a remnant magnetism but no magnetic field. How do you align a gyro? Well, we just assumed the shadow's west. And when we landed, the sun was about 15 degrees above the horizon in the east. And so you could see the craters as you came in. You could tell the surface was tilted towards you or away from you by the albedo of the surface. So John was flying, I was talking him down, and we came in and landed, as the other crews did, on what was sort of a neutral looking moon, if you will. By that I mean not too bright, not too dark. It turned out we were within 1 degree of level. Well, the sun always stayed in the east. Sunrise to sunset, as you know, is 2 weeks on the moon, so Apollo's there 72 hours. It was always daylight. Always morning of the moon day, so the shadow was always in the west, pointing west. So we drove the car to point this vehicle front end down sun, and we had a little line that we put over the directional gyro, and we just turned it to 270 was underneath the line at the top of the gyro. So that was our direction, and we had an odometer on the right rear wheel that gave us distance. So, okay, John, let's go 120 for 2.2 kilometers, and left to a right to 140 for another 1 kilometer, and that was supposed to be point A. Well, point A, let's say, was Plum Crater or Flag Crater, things like that. Well, it's like going through the forest looking for a single tree. Is that really the tree I'm looking for? So as you drove across, you wondered if that was really the crater you were searching for. But we assumed it was close, so most of the time we could tell exactly, but in a few instances, well, this is close enough, we're going to stop here. This is me in my younger days as my pre-flight suit. You've seen the Saturn. Bill Anders talked about the vibration. One thing he did say was the windows of Apollo are covered over at this point, at liftoff, if you will, by a boost protective cover, so you cannot see out except for one window, which is in the hatch and behind the center seat, which was very difficult to look back this way for me out that hatch to see. So you're basically going into space depending on the instruments and listening to mission control, so you go, you go, you go. Well, when this thing lifted off, it started vibrating, and I remember Bill and others saying, this thing's going to really shake, but I didn't realize it was going to shake as much as it did, and it just never really registered with me, this shakiness. So as it began to shake, I got a little nervous. I thought there was something wrong with it. John was commander. He had all the flight instruments, and I was just watching the electrical system, the environmental control system, and things like that. So as we lifted off, later on, my heart was pounding. Later on, I asked our flight surgeon, I said, what was my heartbeat at liftoff? Similar to Jim's, mine was 144 at liftoff. And I said, what was John's? The commander, now this was John's 4th flight into space. He eventually did 6. He said he was the commander. I said, what was John's? He said 70. So you can see who the cool one was on our liftoff anyway. Another view, here I am in a suit room getting suited up, breathing pure oxygen to denitrogenate. Our liftoff, as I said, was shaky. If I remember, it took about 7 seconds, 8 seconds to clear the tower. The first stage was from here down and lasted, in our case, for 2 minutes and 41 seconds. And we had burned up 4.5 million pounds of fuel in the first stage. Here's the view of Earth we had. You can see we're about 30,000 kilometers away now. We took this picture. Here's the Terminator. This is the Gulf of Alaska up here, the Arctic Circle here, down across the U.S. This is the central, the western U.S., the Rocky Mountains, the Baja California, the Gulf of California. Here is Los Angeles in northern California, Yucatan Peninsula here, down around the Gulf of Mexico. Here's Florida. Here, and Texas would be about right in here. The northern part of South America is here, and here is the Pacific Ocean. To me, it was just a jewel of beauty hung in the blackness of space. the brown of the land, the pure white of the snow and the clouds, and the crystal blue of the ocean, and there it was, suspended in blackness. As you can see from this picture and the others that you've seen, out in deep space, the sun is always shining, and like on Earth, when the sun shines, you don't see any stars. So we didn't had any star field on the way, but we did have a telescope, as Jim demonstrated. You could look through the telescope and use and mark on stars, see stars in the telescope, which you could then align your reference to give you the guidance that you needed to fire the engine in the correct position. But just looking out the window, we had no visual reference. Here is, punching the wrong button. Here's a view of the landing sites, not only our landing sites, but the Russian landing sites, which are all unmanned. Apollo 11 is here. This is our landing site. It was in the Descartes Mountains, about 9 degrees east, 10 degrees south, and about 15 degrees, take that back, 15 degrees east and about 9 degrees south. Apollo 17 here, Apollo 15 up here, the most northern landing spot, Apollo 12, Apollo 14. Apollo 14 was Frau Morrow, and that's where Jim and Apollo 13 was supposed to land, but of course didn't make it. The elevation on the moon, the Maury, was sort of sea level. We landed about 7,000 feet above in the Descartes Highlands. And so our landing site was selected by, as all were, by a set of scientists that were selected to, that covered the spectrum of scientific knowledge and where would be the best place to land. Our only input, as near as I could see, was can we land there? Was it too rough? Was it not too rough? And if we thought, yeah, we can land there, then that's what they picked because it would maximize our scientific experiments. When Apollo was announced, we did as we were developing what would we do now if we land, what were we going to do? And of course, everybody said, well, let's pick up some rocks. You know, that's one of the purposes, to go pick up rocks on the moon. Well, we were all fighter pilots, test pilots, and we could tell you the difference between a rock and a piece of dirt, but that was not sufficient. So they made us all geologists, and most of us had an equivalent of a master's degree in geology before we went on our missions. I say this in jest, it's just hopefully draw a laugh. It's not really true, but lesson number 1 in geology is the most important. And lesson number 1 is pick up one of every color on the moon. And on the moon we had gray ones, black ones, and white ones, at least in our landing spot. But there was a lot more to it than that, and of course, it's a funny story, but it's not a true story. We did a lot of good geology on all of our missions, bringing back over 600 pounds of lunar material during the Apollo program. The J missions were designed not for 30 hours on the moon for 2 guys, but for 72 hours on the moon for 2 guys. And as a result, we divided our time up into 3 24-hour periods. We would have a rest period. We would eat, wake up, eat. We would put on our suits, prepare to go outside, which took a couple hours. We would open the door, and if you, and the hatch was, I was on the right side, like a co-pilot would be in an airliner. The commander, like Jim, was on the left side of the lunar module, and that was the crew. Lunar module pilot, which is sort of misnomer, it's more of a co-pilot, and the commander on the left. And so when you got suited up, ready to go, the hatch was right here in the center, and I reached down and opened and unlocked the hatch and pulled it this way. So John, our commander, got out first. I closed the hatch, went over on his side, opened the hatch, and then I got outside. And like Buzz says, you didn't want to close it and lock it, you just wanted to leave it a little ajar so that you make sure you could get back in okay. So we would suit up, we would go outside to explore. The longest for us was like 7 hours and 40 minutes. We got back inside, we took off our suits, we recharged our backpacks, we debriefed mission control, and as a result, we went to sleep for 8 hours. We were 6 hours late landing in our mission because of a problem in the command module. We did have a main engine problem, but the engine was not a problem, but the control system on the engine was a problem, which was redundant. So now we're down to one system, which was an abort, but mission control took them 6 hours, but they figured out the problem, gave us a workaround, and it showed to me on my flight the amazing capability of mission control to be involved directly in those missions. Every mission had a problem that mission control was able to overcome and land safely. They couldn't land Apollo 13, but we got them back safely with the input from mission control. So my hats are off to those guys and gals at mission control. They did a fabulous job and showed the teamwork and training efficiencies that NASA had developed. And so we were late landing, and so they changed our flight plan. Instead of powering down, putting on our suits, our backpacks, we already had our suits on, put on our backpacks and get out and explore. What we did was they changed it and said, no, what we're going to do, by the time you get back inside, get ready to go to have a rest period, you'll be 35 hours awake. So we're going to change the flight plan, and you're going to go to sleep first. And this is 4 hours after you land on the moon. Can you imagine trying to go to sleep 4 hours after you landed on the moon? Your mind is racing like crazy. You're describing every rock you can see outside, looking at all this fantastic scenery that we were looking at. And so we said, yes, sir. But I didn't get much sleep that first night. But after the next 2 rest periods, you were exhausted because working in a spacesuit for 8 hours is a real challenge. This is the command module, seen from my window as we separated in lunar orbit. You're looking down at the lunar surface. Jim described the probe part of the command module. His antennas pointed at the Earth. Lunar module here looks like it's upside down, but there's no upside down in space. Mattingly took this as we were looking out into space. These little rods here were electrical circuits, so when this little tip touched the moon, it turned on the light inside, said contact, and you shut the engine off and you dropped in the last meter or so. You didn't want to land with the engine running because if you landed on a big rock and plugged up the engine, it would blow up. Not a good deal, so we shut the engine while we were still in flight. The descent stage, the lunar rover was folded up and bolted to this side right here. Here's the windows. I'm looking out of this window. Here is the door I was referring to. When you got on the moon, if this was the back of the spacecraft, this was the door. You got down this way, you got on your hands and knees, and you backed out, rear end first, onto the porch, which was here, and then you climbed down the ladder onto the descent to the footpad. From the footpad to the door, to give you some idea, is about almost 5 meters. We've landed now in a place called, as I said, the Descartes Highlands. It was a big valley called the Cayley Plain. To the south of us, we had this massive mountain. It was called Stone Mountain. We were able on the second day to drive the car up until this position right here. And I have a slide for that later. That's about 4 kilometers away from where we landed. So the lunar rover was a revolutionary step in lunar exploration. This is looking to the west. You can see it's washed out more because this is looking down sun, and as you look down sun, it was brighter than when you looked into the sun. Because when you look down sun, you're looking at the sunlit side of the dust and the rocks and the soils. So you're looking at the reflective surface of the lunar surface. the shadow of the lunar module. This is the radar antenna that Buzz was talking about, that he had left on that caused his computer overloads. Here I am saluting the flag. One of the reasons we have the moon hoax, people that think we really didn't land on the moon, they see a picture like this. Look at that, the flag's waving in the breeze. So the moon doesn't have any atmosphere, so how can the flag wave in the breeze? Plus, there are no stars in the sky, so they fake this in a hangar somewhere in Arizona somewhere. Well, the flag is held out not by a 40-knot wind, but by a curtain rod that's holding it out. And it's wrinkled because it was vacuum packed for 6 months. And when I got there, I tried to straighten it out, and I couldn't get the wrinkles out. I had no iron to iron it. So we just put it up with the wrinkles in it. And if you look at this picture, this similar picture, 72 hours later, it still has the same wrinkles. So we all had our picture taken. You can see the lunar footprints, our footprints in the lunar dust. They're very, very fine, like powder, talc, but it had very good bearing strength, and as you stepped on it, you never sank in more than a couple of centimeters. Here's again Stone Mountain with the front of the rover, the TV camera, the ladder down here. Behind me is a far UV camera that the U.S. Naval Observatory had given us to deploy, and that was John's job, and he got that done. Here's a picture of our rover, and John Young is working on the antenna. Where we landed on the moon, the Earth was almost directly overhead, so we rarely saw the Earth from our landing spot, because when you look up, you're looking at the top of your helmet. So to see the Earth, you had to grab hold of the equipment and look backward like that and look up, and there was the Earth. It was a half Earth in the sky, and as we look back, we saw a half Earth, and you saw a half moon. The moon was going towards full, and the Earth to the reverse, to waning. Again, a picture of, this is me now on the edge of Plum Crater. You can see as we parked back on the east side, we walked around the edge of the crater to the northwest side, and if you got in too close, you could fall into this crater, and we had no rescue. By this time, we had put up our Apollo Lunar Surface Experiments package. It had 2 seismic experiments. It had a magnetometer, it had a mass spectrometer, it had a heat flow experiment that unfortunately failed because we damaged the electrical connection between the heat flow, the central station, which was a power distribution station to the experiments, and also the data collecting point. So we lost the heat flow experiment, which was the only one failure we had on Apollo. Finally, Apollo 17 got it done, and here's a handle, the shovel that we used to collect rocks. We had hammers that we could put in our pockets. You can see the suits. We turned out looking like Mr. Clean here, but we started getting covered with moon dust right away. And it was so fine you could not brush it off. We had a brush, we tried to brush off, but it was impossible. So we collected a lot of dust on the suits and our boots, and so when we walked back inside, we were covered with moon dust. The floor of the lunar module was covered with dust, and when we didn't think anything. The problem was when we got back in orbit, all the dust floated up into the spacecraft. And it was so thick, we didn't expose our environmental control system to this dust. So we joined up with Mattingly about an hour later. He takes out the hatch, he opens a hatch and looks in, and he says, "You're not coming in here." So he floats over this dirt devil's vacuum cleaner, and we vacuumed up the lunar dust, and then he would allow us to get back into the lunar back into his command module. this was actually the first stop on our EVA, first EVA. So as we kept going in Apollo, we got smarter and smarter and more capability. So instead of 33 hours, we were staying 72 hours. Apollo 17 stayed 75 hours. We collected 98 kilos of rock. They collected well over 100 kilos. And so the mission expanded and expanded. One of the things we were very disappointed was that Apollo was 18, 19, and 20 were canceled. And it was a political decision. Some science to it, but mostly political. Astronauts were very disappointed because we had the vehicles. The hardware was available. The lunar rovers were available. Everything was ready to go. All the way we had to do, the crews could have been trained, and we could have gone 3 more times, but Apollo was ended. So while we were on the moon, they announced the space shuttle program, which is coming to an end now next July, next month. It's been a great program. Unfortunately, we don't have much to replace it at this point. I'll just run through these quickly. Here is a sample. You can see some white rocks back over here. This is the what we call South Ray Crater. It was about 8 kilometers away and was outside of our limit of travel. We could not, 5 kilometers we thought was our maximum because the car broke down, you had to walk back, and that was about as much as we thought we could handle. Again, a picture of South Ray Crater as we look out to the northwest. This was a fantastic point. This was up on Stone Mountain. I'm working on the lunar rover here. We're about 300 feet, maybe 400 feet, a little over 100 meters above the Cayley Plains out here. And back out over here is our lunar module, and the view from up here was spectacular as we explored the flanks of the Descartes Formation. Again, looking back, this is now up at the top. John has come down and is looking back up towards the top of Stone Mountain. One of the larger rocks that we visited, well, I'll get it in a minute. This rock right here is on the flank of North Ray Crater. It was one of our last stops on the 3rd day, and that rock doesn't look very big. The problem on the lunar surface, you're looking at objects you've never seen before, so big objects far away look very similar to smaller objects close in, so your depth perception fools you. So I talked John into coming down to this, going to this rock. And so as he went down, we started out, we jogged, and by the time we got down there, we realized that's a big rock. We named it House Rock. It was about 15 meters tall and about 30 meters wide. And the next show, this shows a little sample of it. I'm standing there looking at this big rock, and I got this little hammer in my hand, and I hit it, and a chunk came off about the size of a grapefruit. So like the commercial says, we have a piece of the rock. Again, the lunar module, very very moving picture for me. I had this picture in my suit pocket on the last EVA, and so I walked out. I had permission to do this, by the way, and I pulled it out and I dropped it on the lunar surface, and that picture shows my family, 2 little boys, my wife Dottie, me, and so on the back of it we've written, "This is the family of astronaut Charlie Duke, who landed on the moon in April 1972, and lots of luck to whoever finds it." Well, the temperature on the surface of the moon at this point was like 230 degrees Fahrenheit, and so you can begin to see plastic doesn't last, so it begins to shrivel up, and within another minute or 2 it was just a little shriveled ball. But anyway, it lasted long enough for me to get a picture. On the way home was a little picture of the moon as we started home. picture of Earth in Earth orbit. This is a command module here, and here is the view we had of this half Earth. Everybody is related, Jim related to about holding up your thumb, and underneath is the Earth. Well, I didn't hold my thumb up, but I held my arm up like this in lunar orbit, and sure enough, underneath my hand was the Earth. And at that distance, the thought occurred to me like it did to Jim, you know, there is 5 billion people under my hand. And I don't see the United States, and I don't see Europe, and I don't see Africa or any of Asia. You just see Earth, spaceship Earth. And we're all down here together. And we need to get along, we need to love one another, and with technology we can help solve our problems. And for a few years after that, I went around talking about that. But I had a big basic problem. I didn't even love my wife. How was I going to love you or you? I had an explosive temper. I had a egocentric personality. And that was, we were in deep trouble as a family. And I'm going all over the United States, all over the world, talking about get along. And I was a big hypocrite. But 6 years later, I had an encounter with Jesus. And that changed my life. It was a supernatural relationship. Not a religion, but a relationship with a person who changed my heart. I had peace in my heart. I began to love my wife. I began to love everybody on earth. And I've been all over the earth sharing this love that I have for each of you. I have brown brothers, I have black brothers, I have white brothers, yellow brothers, every race. I have a love for humanity that only came when I had this relationship. And so it was a tremendous change in my life. And like Yuri says, I haven't seen God, but I've seen the effect of God, at least in my life. The supernatural power. I have seen almost gravity-defied, if you will. I was driving down the highway one time, and in front of me was a big truck, and off this truck bounced what I thought was a stick, a piece of wood, but as it came towards my windshield, I realized it was an iron steel crowbar. And you could see the curvature of the crowbar, you could see the hook part of it, and when it got right here, it just turned and went right over the top of my car. I can't explain it, but it happened. I have seen the supernatural power of healing. And so it's a relationship that I have experienced. I know many of you here have not had an experience. And that's okay. We can get along, we can strive together. I tell you one thing, I love you. And I support your work. And I support your science as we try to unlock the knowledge that's available to us with our minds. And so I leave you with that thought, that I have an emotion of love for each of you. It started with my wife, my family, and it spread to everyone in this room and everyone in the world that I come in contact with. So that's my story that happened in Apollo.